Hello and welcome to the WST Level 3 podcast. My name's Chris Scott and we've put these podcasts together to help our students and other students pass the WST Level 3 exam. One of the things we do is we have a large amount of tasting support products that will help most students pass the tasting exam, as well as our exam questions. Our tasting support includes feedback on your tasting note, mock tasting exams, tasting masterclasses followed by tasting exam resets, as well as a guide that accompanies our audio guide to the WST SAT. Do consider our exam questions as well. We've got over 500 questions and a mixture of multi-choice and long answer exam style questions. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm here with Jim Tresize. How are you, Jim?
I'm just terrific, thanks.
Excellent. You're the president of the New York Grape and Vine, is that right?
New York Wine and Grape Foundation, yes.
What is that you guys do?
Well, we represent all New York grape growers and wineries and even grape juice producers, and all means 260 wineries in New York State, over 1,000 vineyards, and some large grape juice producers like Welch's that's known around the world.
Sure, I drink Welch's not every day, but pretty much.
Well, then your heart is beating very well.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Excellent. So what is the New York viticulture scene like?
It's very interesting. New York is actually one of the oldest but newest wine regions in the United States. Obviously, we're one of the oldest regions because the Europeans, came to our side of the continent. And actually, it was 400 years ago that Henry Hudson from England sailed out of Amsterdam and discovered the Hudson River, which is now one of the wine regions that we have. Base of the Hudson River is New York City, which of course flows into the Atlantic. Far away from that to the west is the Finger Lakes region, where most of the wines are made. We have over 100 wineries there and about 80% of our total production.
Okay, and what are the subregions?
In the Finger Lakes region, the largest region, there are two sub-appellations named after two of the lakes, Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake.
You talked about the regions. American system's called AVAs, isn't it? What's that for?
Yep, and it stands for American Viticultural Area. So it's a specific region that has certain soil and temperature characteristics.
And are the wine's supposed to represent a particular style from there, or is it more an association body? Like in New Zealand, for example, they have a thing called GI, Geographical Indicators.
Right.
Very, very loose, hardly any controls in it. And then you go to maybe the extreme, which is appellation control in France, which is very structured and very rigid. How does the AVAs fit in with that?
We're more like New Zealand's. In other words, the whole idea of the American Viticultural Area, which our federal government administers, is to give consumers information about where the grapes were grown, so that if a bottle of wine has one of those areas on it, then at least 85% of those grapes, the grapes in that wine, have to be grown in that particular area. So it's not necessarily stylistic, but it is geographic, so people know exactly where the grapes came from.
All right. And if you get a change in soil types, does it change the AVA, or is it?
No, it doesn't change the AVA at all. I mean, in the Finger Lakes, for example, which were carved out by glaciers, we have soil types, acre by acre. So it's not something that's consistent across the whole region.
Okay, you're looking at the maps of the Finger Lakes. You can see where it was probably glaciers, was it, that were coming down? And
10,000 years ago, the Pleistocene era. And it was basically these glaciers that came from north to south, and they dug these huge trenches. There were actually 14 lakes altogether.
There's a lot of fingers.
There's a lot of fingers, that's right. That's three hands. And but the wine region itself is around three of the major ones and a couple minor ones, so that Seneca, Cayuga, and Cayuga Lakes are the major ones, and Skaneateles and Kinesis as well. So the region is larger than the wine region, but it's a great wine region because of the lakes. Without the lakes, the temperature would be too cold for us to grow the grapes.
Sure. Actually, talking about the grapes and the temperature, we tasted some of your wines just before, and they seem to be quite aromatic, cool climate varieties like Riesling, Pinot Gris. So we've got a Sauvignon Blanc in there. It seems to be quite a range of grape varieties for different climates.
Yes, it's very eclectic, and actually we do have several climates. I mean, all of New York is certainly considered a cool climate region. Now, when you go to the upstate region, the Finger Lakes, which is the largest region, you have the smaller lakes, and they do moderate the temperature, but it is colder there. So that's where we have the aromatic white wines, Riesling in particular, but also Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, and others as well.
I imagine you're starting to get a bit of altitude as well if you've got
Yes.
ex-glaciers up
Yes, there is a lot more altitude, obviously, than Long Island. So it's and what's interesting is that the way the glaciers dug out the lakes is they pushed all the rocks and soil from north to south. So the northern end of the lakes, the surrounding land is relatively flat. It's almost Long Island. But as you go to the southern end of the lakes, you get these very steep hillsides because that's where all of the earth was pushed.
Oh, okay, interesting. We talked a wee bit about a couple of grape varieties, but I noticed a list of grapes that are grown in New York State, and it seemed to have pretty much everything in there. It's got all sorts of stuff, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Saint Merlot, Cabernet Franc. What's the history of grape varieties in New York State?
Well, it's fascinating. One of the great things about New York City is its diversity. You have populations from all over the world, all kinds of languages, customs, cultures, and so forth. And our wine industry kind of reflects that as well. We have a great diversity of grape varieties, much more so than almost any wine region in the world. And we started out with what we call the Native American varieties, Labrusca. So Concord, like you have in your Waltz's grape juice, Catawba, Niagara. These are very aromatic, fruity wines that a lot of people still really love. But wine connoisseurs rarely, drink them. So
what did you call it? It's Vitis Lambrusca?
Vitis Labrusca. Labrusca.
Yep.
And so those were the ones that grew naturally in upstate New York. And then in the
good natural resistance to phylloxera as well.
In natural resistance to phylloxera, very cold hardy, so you didn't have to worry about a really cold winter. They would always survive the winter.
And were they there when Hudson arrived? Were there wild grapes in New York when
there were?
When
there were. And in fact, they were just celebrating because of all the wild grapes growing on the hillsides. The problem was the wild grapes didn't make very good wine. But what it did say is that you could cultivate grapes in that area, and so they started creating new breeds of grapes. So there was the first wave that was already there, the Concord, Niagara, Delaware, the Labrusca varieties, and then the French in response to the phylloxera epidemic, they created all the hybrids, like Sauvignon Blanc and Vidal and Rayon d'Or and so forth, and those were imported to New York. So that was the second wave, and what they did is they combined the hardiness of American vines with the taste characteristics of European wines. And then finally, a couple of Europeans, a Frenchman, or Charles Fournier rather, and a Russian, Dr. Konstantin Frank, they brought the Vitis vinifera, the European wines, to New York amidst a lot of skepticism. People said, no, you cannot grow these here. It's too cold. And Dr. Frank said, wait a minute, I was growing these in the Ukraine. It's cold there as well. And so if I can do it there, I can do it here. And the two of them proved that you could grow great Rieslings if you do it right. There are certain cultural practices in the vineyard that you have to do for them to survive the winter. But
you have to rake soil over the roots.
That's exactly right. You have to cover the roots every year, so it's more labor intensive. But the thing is, it can be done, and especially with varieties like Riesling, the aromatic whites, the region is just perfect for it. And so now we become famous for it.
The Rieslings, I thought, when we tasted them were, whilst we didn't taste many, I think it was only about 3 or 4 Rieslings, but they did have a real stone fruit characteristic, which to me implies that it is quite warm, even more warm than, the absolute extreme of what Riesling needs.
Yeah. Our harvest seasons are almost always as wonderful. It's the end of summer, so the nights are getting cooler, which is great for the flavor. But they're warm, sunny days, and so the ripening, happens very, very quickly, and you do get, really great ripeness, and so you have a nice balance of the sugary acid and pH, and Rieslings that are winning gold medals all over the world.
What style? Because when we tasted the Riesling and the Pinot Gris and the aromatics, there seemed to be a range of styles from quite dry through to quite sweet. In fact, we even had a late harvest. What's the favorite style, and where are the wines sold?
The favorite style at this point is, in terms of Riesling, would be an off-dry style, not totally bone-dry, not sweet, but somewhere in between, have a little bit of, a lot more aroma and so forth. But we also have a lot of, the traditional, the drier wines. Where are they sold? Predominantly at the wineries themselves, and therefore in the regions, in the tasting rooms. And we get over 4 million visitors a year to the wineries in New York State. It's one of the largest areas in terms of visitation. And so for the wineries, the best thing they can do is sell directly to the customer. And so probably 75% of the wine of the small wineries is sold directly to the customer in the tasting room. The rest of it, by and large, is either within the region or certainly within New York State. So we do have a small export program, which is why we're here. And this is a great, great show that we always participate in.
We're at the London International Wine Fair at the moment.
But most of the wines are sold within New York State.
How much wine is produced in New York, bottles, or do you have a rough idea?
Yeah, about 200 million bottles a year
that's not
are produced in
insignificant.
New York. No, it is. We have good production. Obviously, in the United States, California is in a league of its own.
Yeah.
90% of total production. Washington State is second to California, but very much on a par with New York, and we're very much pretty much equal to Washington.
Okay then, Jim. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.